Good evening and welcome to the June 14, 2021 City Council work session. Thank you for joining us in this remote meeting format we're using in response to Governor Brown's Stay Home, Save Lives order. This format enables the City Council to meet and take care of business while keeping everyone safe. For work sessions like this one, where there is no opportunity for public comment, those wishing to access the meeting can do so by watching the live stream available on our website, the broadcast on Comcast Channel 21, or by calling into one of the phone numbers listed for this meeting on the public webcast and meeting materials webpage. Looking ahead, tonight's regular meeting will include a public forum and one public hearing. Information about how to participate is available on the public webcast and meeting materials webpage. And as always, other avenues of communication with me and city councilors are available, including email and voicemail. Thank you again for tuning in and joining us. And with that, I am actually turning it over to Councilor Yeh as council president, because the first item is Planning Commission applicant interviews.
Thank you. And some of you probably didn't see the last minute email, but we only have one interviewee tonight. One of them had to drop out at the last minute. So we're just going to be hearing from Scott Lemons tonight. And Naya, do we know if I didn't check to see if he is in.
Yes, Scott is in the meeting.
Oh, okay, I see him now. I'm so sorry. Sorry, Scott. So welcome. I'm going to give you the brief instructions, but I believe you've done this before. So you're going to have 3 minutes to make a statement. After you're done with the statement for Planning Commission candidates, we actually have 3 questions that the counselors are going to ask you. And you'll be able to respond after your 3 minutes. And Councilor Keating, I am chatting you your question. So, okay.
I got him. Thanks.
Okay, excellent. So, Scott, you can start whenever you're ready.
All right. Thank you all for having me, and thank you for your time. So I would like to say good evening, city councilors, especially Councilor Semple. I think we've worked a lot together, and it's good to see you again. So I've had the pleasure of living in Eugene for the last 13 years. All of which I've lived downtown. I have a bachelor's in psychology and a minor in public policy planning and management, which was focused on city planning from the University of Oregon. I decided to stick around in this town because first of all, it's absolutely amazing. I love the values, ethics, and how beautiful it is. But I also saw the problems that I could apply my skills to, and I thought this would be a really good spot for me to help people. I also picked up my drug counseling license while attending the U of O. If I am afforded the opportunity to be on this commission, I would not be bringing solely my education, but more importantly, my life experience. So being unhoused as a youth was quite impactful on me and gives me a lot of insight into what's going on in the city in particular. And then I've also lived in affordable housing now for 12 years. So I would be definitely coming from that side of things a little more. And then I've experienced drug addiction in my family way too much. And I don't hold any judgment against anyone like that, but I think that that and the unhoused crisis is one of the biggest things that the city is facing right now. It did take a while for me to understand the intersectionality of these experiences with planning decisions, but now that I understand it, I think that it's going to prove to be the most important contribution that I can make while I'm here in the city. And I hope to honestly retire here as well. I love this place. And I now work at LILA, the Lane Independent Living Alliance, which has given me even more insight into the housing situation and just planning in general and how tight the market is here. From my understanding, there's a shortage of 4,000 to 5,000 affordable units in the city. And also my experience on the Middle Income Zoning Equity Commission provided a lot of insight into the city's mandate with HB 2001, as well as the issues that we are looking at right now. And I see that I have 20 seconds left. So I just wanted to really point out, if there is an applicant who is from an Indigenous community please give them the seat and not me. As I'm sure you all are aware, we are living on stolen land, and the wisdom from these communities brings an invaluable knowledge base and should always be centered in land use discussions. Thank you.
Thanks, Scott. And like I said, Alan has our first question.
Thanks, Scott. So what key issues would you hope to address as a member of the Planning Commission?
Well, definitely the affordability issue in the city. I forget the statistics. I think it's somewhere around we're 80% in the range of affordability in the country, which boggles my mind. But with the urban growth boundary, I also understand why. And being on that middle income zoning equity commission, I love HB 2001. It's just going to be a little hard to figure out. So I would like to see more affordable housing, even though HB 2001 isn't solely focused on that. Another huge thing that I would do is equity and planning in every aspect. So considering the disabled community, considering historically marginalized communities. I'm sure you all are aware of the racist history that we have in Oregon and the exclusionary laws that made certain opportunities not available to certain communities. And I think it's our responsibility as a city to rectify as much of that as possible through these land use decisions. I'm obviously focused on increasing the housing stock of Eugene because I see that problem, especially after my experience with the Zoning Equity Commission. I would also be very, very focused on finding alternative financing options for people in the city of Eugene, especially long-term residents and underserved populations. So for example, like community land trusts and community banks. I know it's kind of a hard pull, but I think the city is completely capable of doing so. I would also be focused on accessibility, not only for the community that I represent, people with disabilities, but also historically marginalized communities and just people who have lived here for a very long time and are being priced out of this city just based upon the economics of what's going on.
Scott, excuse me, as a group, the Planning Commission often works on lengthy processes and decisions. Would you describe your skills, experience, and approach that will assist you in working in a constructive and collaborative manner, please?
Yeah, for sure. A lot of my history actually comes out of doing a lot of activism around the kind of stuff we're talking about tonight. But also I supervise a couple programs at Lila. And I think collaboration is key. If you don't have too many people to bounce ideas off of, you're not gonna get to where you want to go, or have any idea really included where it should be. So I love policy. I'm actually a policy nerd, and I understand the time horizons involved with planning decisions. I have supervised, as I alluded to, several organizations and always ensure that it's a collaborative environment. And how I do so is by making sure that everyone has space to speak and never doubting anybody's intentions. Everyone is here to do their best. And they just, if you don't doubt someone's intentions and you understand that they're coming from their life experience, it leads to a much more cohesive and a more effective group. I'm sorry, that was my answer.
Thanks, Scott. So I've got the third question and the last question. The Planning Commission must often consider balancing complex issues when reviewing planning documents and making land use decisions. In your opinion, what are the most important factors for the Planning Commission to consider in these efforts?
Okay, great. Thank you. I would say, from my perspective, the most important factors with land use decisions would be transparency and buy-in from the entire community and community engagement. I know planning, and because like the last question alluded to, it is a very long-term thing. Community engagement might be a little harder, but I think it is so important to have the buy-in from all of the citizens in Eugene for a common vision of the future. I also really would be centering environmental concerns and health disparities and impacts on where we're building and why and when. I'm sure you all are aware of the health disparities in West Eugene and near the paper mills and stuff like that. And I would very much be focused on that, and also, you know, environmental sustainability, making sure that whatever we're building, whatever we're zoning, is gonna not just keep the environment the way it is, but also maybe improve it if we can do so. And I think the city of Eugene has done a great job with these, oh geez, I forget what they call them. Sorry, it's been a late day, but the drains where they have all the native plants that, you know, takes out all the pollution before it enters our rivers. I think Eugene has done an awesome job there. And I do want to highlight how important the green space accessibility is. Even living downtown, Skinner's Butte has saved my life so many times. So I would very much be focused on the green space accessibility as well. Affordability, as I've alluded to before, is very key to what I would be focusing on. And then, of course, equity. You know, I can't highlight that enough. We all understand where we come from, and I think I already said this, but it's our responsibility. I think planning in particular has the most power to rectify some of the history that we come from. And I guess the last point that I would want to bring up is keeping neighborhoods together. You know, these neighbors have lived together for a long time. They've formed really great relationships. And I know the city is growing, and I would just try to avoid gentrification to the most amount possible and keep these communities together. And even if that requires some kind of subsidy or some kind of creative financing, I don't want people to lose their social networks and their support systems just because the city is growing.
I think those things you couldn't remember the name of, I think they're called bioswales.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Yes, that's exactly what they are. I live right next to one and I go check it out all the time. Thank you.
Well, Scott, thank you so much for coming tonight and taking time out of your day to speak to us. We really appreciate it. And since Scott is our only candidate tonight, I think we are done with this and we will move on.
Okay, well, I just wanted to thank you all for your time and for all the work that you do. It's an amazing city, and I just really hope to contribute in any way possible. So it's good to see you all again, and I hope you all have a great meeting.
Thank you so much.
Okay, bye.
Okay, and now our next item of business, I'm going to turn it over to the manager, is to go back to vision, values, goals, and our operating agreements.
Yeah, so the point.
Can I just point of order? I didn't know this was added to our agenda. Were we noticed of that today?
We talked about it last week when we were going along, and we were going to come back on Monday so that we would have Councilor Evans here, and he's not here, so that's a little bit of an issue. He did email Brooke and said he was good with the document, but if you still want him to be a part of the final vote,
no,
we could.
I bring this up for purely selfish reasons. It's my wedding anniversary. I'd love to have an hour with my husband between meetings, but also it wasn't in our AIS that we were.
Yeah, I apologize for that.
I caught by surprise.
I could be done with it in 10 minutes. I'm not sure if you can be, but I can work towards your goals. So I'm just going to jump right in. I'm not sure if you guys are going to feel strongly about having Counselor Evans, because if you are, then I would propose I just bring this back on a consent calendar at some point, and I don't need to walk through it with all of you again. So I guess I will. I'm seeing some nods on at least that piece. Having him vote on it at a consent. Okay. If he shows up in this conversation, then we can go back to that.
Vision statement, right?
The vision, values, and goals. Yeah. Which all of you have already pretty much said yes to, and you were kind of waiting for him. So if he doesn't sign on, then I think the second piece of that was to look at some of the operating agreements as it related to kind of implementing those goals. And we had a number of changes with that. I can walk through that really quick. And then Councilor Zelenka sent some motions. So just really briefly, looking at my, which one of these documents it's on. Let's see here. Okay. Sorry, guys. Does not want to share it. There we go. So I just want to make a comment about just generally about your operating agreement. So these are adopted by resolution, and you have been operating with a number of sort of pilots for a while, though I think when you originally did those, there was a conversation around, you know, we can change these at any time. We don't actually need to pilot it because it is your operating agreement. So what happens when we do these pilots is we end up kind of keeping a draft, a running draft that's sort of waiting for you to vote on it. So what I was going to propose tonight is that you actually go ahead and bundle all of these, including the things you're piloting, and vote it, send it to a consent calendar at a later date so you can vote on it by resolution. I think it's a little bit of a cleaner process, and it makes sure that we're not actually inadvertently doing things that weren't intended. So there's really no changes until you get down into the public forum. So everything you're seeing in red are the things that you've been piloting for a while, and the blue is what I talked about last week. So it really just goes back to making it part of your regular process, that if there's one of those priority items that normally would be on consent, that we actually make sure that we do it before consent and that we have staff available to make a couple of comments, or that you have that time. So that was what that was intended. The rest of these are the pilots you've been doing around 2.5 minutes and the 90-minute total and the shuffling. I want to speak to that. It's been really challenging to do some of these techniques while we've been in the pandemic. So for example, people coming at 7 and being able to sign up at 7. We haven't been able to do that at 7 because often these meetings are running longer because we're on Zoom and we can't get from one platform to the other platform. But when we're back in person, we'll be back to doing that 7 p.m. sign up again. So that's just a point of clarification. The public hearings night, we talked about just adding some language here to make it possible and allowable for you to have presentations from your standing advisory bodies. Doesn't mean that's the only time they can come, but it just opens that night up if there happens to be time. Sorry, you're gonna get seasick, because then we jump right down to the council poll. There was just clarification around what to put in it. And then you had a couple of things here around your committee reports and items of interest that just basically said you're going to do it at these meetings first, unless there's a ceremonial matter. And then the action items refer to that public forum and doing those priority consent items. So it just falls in line with that. The red is what you've already been piloting, which is having that consent calendar 2 with land use items. And I think that's everything that is in here. So my recommendation was going to be just that there be a motion to bring that back. I can show you what that was. And I know we've had maybe some other comments since then, but this would have been mine, which was to approve the changes as presented and discussed, because I know you're going to have discussion, and that we put it on an upcoming consent agenda. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen.
Okay, thank you. So I'm going to open this for discussion. I know that Alan has submitted some pretty significant motions. And so I just want to put it out there for you that you can act sort of as Sarah sort of suggested in terms of adopting these as your pilot projects now. You can undertake a pretty exhaustive conversation, which these motions, I think, are calling for a pretty thorough discussion because they're new to the table. So my thought about this meeting is that we do a round, but I would ask you in that round to weigh in on whether you actually want to have, first of all, to vote on the kind of the operating agreements as they stand, whether you want to come back, give staff a little bit of time to sort of vet and review, assess how they would respond to some of the proposed changes that Alan has proposed, particularly the question around the sorting of the queue. So I'm kind of looking for some insight from you about whether you want to dive in, make some more significant changes, try to do that this meeting, whether you I'm just looking for a signal from you about, are you interested in a follow-up meeting later, maybe approving these now, and then having the time to do a deeper dive at a later time, because Alan has proposed some pretty significant changes. So just trying to get in ahead of that. And I see counselors jumping up right away. So I will go for, I lost track of the sequence already, but it looks like I have, okay. I'm going to go for Mike, and then Claire, and then Matt, and then Randy, and then Jennifer.
Just real quickly, I don't know that I need to make any changes to what I have seen, but if Alan has motions, and this is the subject meeting of the subject of our meeting, I think he has kind of a right to make them. And, I'm a little distressed that we would move outside of process here to allow him to make his motions. If there's support for them, there is. If there's not, there's not. But I would want to move forward in a normal way of business and allow him to make them.
I'll just clarify. I'm not, Alan is free to make the motions. And I'm assuming that he will when his turn comes. I'm actually looking, as you comment, about whether you want, as part of that, to allow a little more extended time for staff to come back with some thoughts on those motions. So that's all my only, because I think several of these are going to require some discussion, and I just want to make sure we get to them and not rush through them. All right, Claire.
Thank you, Mayor. So I have not had a chance to look at the motions that Councilor Zelenka sent. This Monday of the month, I'm in meetings from 9 till 9. So I couldn't open my city council email and get a preview. But I agree with Councilor Clark. If this is the opportunity to have those motions considered, I'm perfectly fine with that. I did want to just ask a kind of practical question. And so this actually speaks to, yes, I think depending on what the motions are, we might want to discuss them, but maybe table them until staff can tell us what the practical implications of them are. And so one practical question I have for staff, and this would really be for when we return to in-person meeting, around this question of, because if we stick with the mixing up of the order in which people speak, and people have no idea, if they're beginning of the queue or end of the queue, if it would not be an undue burden on staff to write up the order of speakers once they have them either on a dry erase board or a laptop, and people could view the list. So people have a sense of where they are in the speaking order. So that's just a request I just wanted to put out there, not a formal motion. Thanks.
Okay, Matt and then Randy.
Thanks, Mayor. It may be a little premature for me to speak to the motion. I'm supportive of the concept, but I do long for us to have a full complement here to discuss the matters. And so, like Councillor Syrett suggested, tabling to a date specific would, I think, be in order this evening. That way, Councillor Zelenka can get his motions on the table. We can hear from staff about implementing said motions, and we can have a full complement to actually debate, discuss at the next earliest opportunity.
Okay, great. Randy and then Jennifer.
Thank you, Mayor. I too normally would like to just keep things moving along, and feel like we've spent a lot of time on this. At the same time, I think Councillor Zelenka is raising some really good points that I would like to discuss further. I think, and not that I begrudge anyone from testifying multiple times or following the rules, and that's great, but I also think we are precluding some people's voices from coming into the process. And so I would like to have that discussion about what's a fair and equitable way to go about this and make sure we hear from as many people in our community as we can. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Jennifer and then Alan.
Yeah, thanks. So I'll agree with what others have said. I want to make sure, I think what Alan's trying to do is create a welcoming and an inclusive environment more than what we have now is my impression from his comments in the past. And I think a more thorough discussion with staff input would accomplish that better than trying to come up with things on the fly, because I'm not sure that the time and the position of people talking is what makes it not welcoming or makes people feel like they are not included. So having a further discussion later, I think, would give these motions and other potential ones a little more justice and make for a better decision.
Okay, Alan, you're up.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. The motions I put forth in email, they all do need discussion. And in light of Claire's anniversary, I don't think we should discuss them tonight. I think we should put this on the table for another meeting. And we can have a mild discussion and have a more in-depth with staff input into it. It wasn't clear to me either that this was going to be on the agenda until I talked to the mayor this afternoon. And so I put these together rather quickly to get out to the council today because I knew this was going to be on the agenda, but they're not new issues. I've been talking about these for 2 years and I talked about them last meeting as well. So they're certainly not new. Everybody's heard the issues. It's a matter of whether or not we want to follow through on them or not. So just briefly, what they are is the first one is I think that we have set a bad precedence in having discussions on significant public policies very late at night when most people are asleep or should be asleep, or we're at the very end of the day, a very long day, and maybe not at our best. And sometimes that to me is a very inappropriate to follow through on public policy decisions in that case. So some people have said in the dead of the night kind of stuff. So the idea was to, in motion 1, to have those items that are council priority goal items that are going to be action items, have them come before the forum. And that's pretty straightforward and simple. It's whether or not you want to do it. And then we're going to have a conversation about how do we know if something's a council priority goal, which would be a good discussion to have too. The second motion was about getting new voices in front of us and being inclusive. And sometimes people jump off at the end because they're the last people. But and this is about having new voices come to us at the forum and have them be prioritized in the speaking queue. So taking their their names and putting them to the front of the queue, and those that have spoken to us in the past, putting them to the back of the queue. And that is not to quell what they say. It's just a matter of prioritization. I've done similar things, and it's not actually that complicated. You just take a running list of people who have been speakers at the forum, and then you quickly check if they have. If they have, they go into this list, and the same random order, they just get bumped down below everybody else that hasn't spoken. I think it's fairly easy. It might take a little bit of time for them to do it. And then the last one is just, we're running out of time a lot of times, as I am right now. So having a 60-minute instead of a 90-minute public forum, I think is a good idea so we can conduct our business in a timely fashion and meetings at a reasonable hour.
Okay, thank you. So I do agree. I mean, I think these are all worthy of discussion, and I do think that we need to devote a little time to them. So I guess I'm taking the sense from council that you don't need, are there folks that want to say anything else about these proposals now? Not seeing anyone. Okay. So manager, I think we're just going to send this back we'll put this on a work schedule at a later date when we can have a more robust conversation about these specific proposals.
Yep. So what I'm gathering from this is we will continue to put the vision, values, goals on your next consent item, because we still don't have without your sort of at least voting in this stuff as a pilot, we don't really have the process in place to pull it early. Does that make sense? So under your new rules, this would be like prior to your consent calendar. And I would just say, don't forget, we're voting on this thing, and then you would vote on it. But I'll still do it that way, and one of you can pull it. And then the other will just hold until you have time to have a work session.
That work for everybody? Matt, yeah.
Yeah, just a process clarification. Do we need Alan's motions on the table and then move to table said motions, or can we just get those motions? Because I may want to make an amendment at that time, just to be perfectly clear. And there should be no surprises. I talked about it when we last met about extending the time for folks to sign up to speak. Not much, just a 5-minute, 10-minute tops extension.
I didn't make any motions, so I was intending to make them at the next meeting.
Okay, great.
Yeah, and you can make that intention clear as well, Matt, and anybody else who has any other modifications they want to make. I guess that works. My other thought about this had been whether, well, I think we'll leave it as it is. I guess I won't follow that other path. I was thinking you might want to just vote on these as they are, just to create that clarity for staff until we have the next work session, but maybe that's adding too many layers of approval. Yeah, I'm seeing a shake head, so I think that's not workable. Okay, I guess we're clear on that, and we're all wishing Claire and Davey a happy anniversary and wanting to make sure they have time to celebrate that before the next meeting. So, go on and have a wonderful meal, and thank you all. We'll all see you back here at 7:30.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, everyone.